All right. My name is Ben Burgis. This is Brent Lengel, who's been on the show several times before, but not for a little while. He is a playwright, comic artist, many things, which we'll get into and plug at the end. But he's also somebody who I invited on for this one because I know that that this is an issue that he cares about, has like a very strong stance on, like in some ways probably I'm on the same general wavelength, but in some ways probably like a more well-defined stand than I have, which we'll certainly get into. But Brent, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Really happy to be back. It's been entirely too long. I have been working in fulfillment for my two comic series, Snow White Zombie Apocalypse and Durruti Shadow of the People. And the nice. Durruti, a prequel movie has actually, we're in pre-production now, but like I've even got an IMDb page and everything now.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I wrote that one on a commission. So, we're telling Durruti's story and just in general trying to make the world a better, saner place. And yeah, you probably don't have as radical an opinion as I do, but I do that on purpose. The job of an artist is to go beyond the pale.
That's fair.
Yeah, if everybody agreed with me, I'd probably change my position. So,
okay, fair enough. So this is about, the title of the debate is like, should America shut its borders? And it's a really, it's a free press debate. We watched, not you and I, but, we watched a previous debate they did on this channel before. And, they seem to specialize in like having slightly weird combinations of people. The one we watched before, one of the debaters was Grimes. There's nobody that out of left field with this one, but this is Sohrab Ahmari and Coulter. Sohrab is somebody who's been a multiple time GTAA guest. Anne has not, although she ever wanted to come on to discuss my her many areas of disagreement with me. That would be interesting. Not holding my breath, but they are on the yes, we should have more restrictive immigration policy side, and the no, we shouldn't side is Cenk Uygur from the Young Turks and Nick Gillespie from Reason Magazine, right? So both of those are in one way or another like cross ideological.
Yeah, this is one of the better. This is one of the better topics for places like Reason Magazine.
Totally.
The right libertarians are the father of several of my ulcers, but I really say I appreciate the work that they're doing on this particular issue. Before we jump into it, I did want to mention just, sure. Beyond ideological issues, if you guys can see behind me, I'm an anarchist, or at least that's what I'm most interested in. But the reason I'm so strong, particularly on borders, is because like my family were peasants in the Carpathian Mountains, and my great grandmother came here as like I think like something like a 12-year-old girl, went through Ellis Island by herself. So I can't really turn around and say to anybody else, like, you can't come here.
I definitely feel the force of that. I was actually thinking about that earlier today, right? One side of my family, were, Ukrainian Jews who, got the fuck out of, there for standard reasons at the beginning of the 20th century. And, the U.S. has certainly gone back and forth over the years about how open the doors are to people in circumstances like that. I think that a lot of, one issue I would expect to come up, right, is in tonight is sort of what counts as like a real asylum seeker and, what doesn't. And, I know certainly in terms of a lot of people coming from, Mexico and Point South, oftentimes the issue is about, well, are you really an asylum seeker, or are you really just, fleeing from crime and, poverty? And, my view on that is that, cartels can kill you just as dead as any government. And that does actually seem like real asylum seeking to me. And certainly, this is something that, I was talking to my friend Jason about earlier this afternoon, because, I'm living, actually, funnily enough, given the topic, I just crossed the Mexican border a few hours ago, uh, which I can do whenever I like, with, nothing worse than the occasional, a scale of annoyingness of conversations with border guards, from very quick to, to more involved and, um, anxiety producing. But, that's like, I can always go through, right? That's not a problem, because obviously as a US citizen, I can come into the US when I like. And Mexico actually, lets people in that, the region, of like the part of Baja that's close to California, they like, actually, as a matter of policy, Americans can just live there without any documentation whatsoever. Like, you can just tell the border guards on both sides, oh yeah, I live here, and it's no problem.
Mhm.
I lived there in Rosarito for about 6 months before, and I'm actually moving back for a few months this summer, save a little rent money. And, that's a option that's available to me. And so it's certainly hard not to think about the, there but for the grace of God of it all, with, since Joe Biden, of course, since the debate happened, but he's, has, done this like executive order to, to make life much harder for asylum seekers. And of course, this is the thing that, I think the sort of very like rigid position that, my understanding is you take, that like, that I think seems sort of, I think this is the sort of like kernel of like undeniable moral force it has, that, it's that say, okay, well, hold on. Why is it that, one person having been born at point A instead of point B should actually matter for whether or not you get to do these things? That seems just hopelessly arbitrary. And, and I do think that whatever exactly you think immigration policies should be,
Mhm.
next month or next year, right? That there's clearly a sense in which it's, there's some level of injustice, as long as people, are, prevented from peacefully moving around as they like, because they were born in the wrong place.
Yeah. I mean, I will, I don't want to get like too far
Sure.
ahead of ourselves, but what I will say is the position I come from on this is one, might does not make right. And borders are 100% creations of the state. They are creations of power and might. Therefore, they are illegitimate, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And then the further thing is that I will say you cannot, I do not currently believe it is possible to make a moral argument to stop the free movement of peaceful people. Now, there's a couple of corollaries on there where it violates it kind of in the spirit, if not literally. For instance, maybe some sort of pandemic, we can stop people from traveling temporarily. But honestly, just because the United States conquered the territory, just because Texas was won by the United States from Mexico at literal gunpoint, doesn't mean that like it is in any way right to keep all of the Mexican people south of the border. And I get very frustrated with people who say otherwise.
Yeah,
But yeah,
no, I definitely get that, right? Like, I think that there's an argument to be made that the combination of the nation state system and, widespread economic inequality means that you often have clashes of interests, between, different groups of workers in different places. And, there's also a question here. I think there are also pragmatic questions about how you'd, like, okay, if I could, wave a magical wand and, and just sort of reset immigration policy, on my own tomorrow, right. That you have, that I think that, what I would like is to bring in, lots of people who want to come and have them be working, above ground in the legal economy, to have, in fact, support to, to sort of get like resettled and, and like not have there be conditions where these people are desperate enough to take any job that anybody offers them.
Immediately swim across like a border where you could die, swimming.
Yeah, of course. Right. It's beyond understandable. Right. But like, this is, I think that there's like an argument for some kind of speed limit. You could argue about, whether there's a certain order of operations here, about like, okay, in the sort of socialist future I'd really want, globally, right. With like, I think of course we'd have open borders there, but like, what order, do you want to do things in so as not to like make things even worse for lots of people right now. I think some of this is a little bit complicated. But look, on a sort of basic level, I mean, I am, even though, one of the, I mean, it's actually going to be kind of a funny debate for me to watch because, I think, Cenk, I don't know personally, but, Anna Kasparian's a good friend. So, I mean, he's sort of not very many degrees of Kevin Bacon, away. And
Cenk, are you watching this?
And
if so, I when I first started seeing you, I was newish in New York, and I started seeing your stuff pop up, and I was like, oh, who's this guy? And I remember just, I don't agree with you on a lot of things. I'm probably a little bit far to the left, but if you are watching this, I will say I really, really love the way in which you talk. Your cadence is freaking phenomenal. And that's a big part as to why I think you're going to do very well in this debate. So don't disappoint me.
And, Sohrab, of course, is somebody I disagree with on many things, but, I always call him a, personal friend and ideological frenemy, which is sort of a joke, but it's probably literally accurate. I mean, man's taking the capital class on the GTAA Patron right now. So I have generally positive feelings towards him, although this is definitely one of the subjects where we have major disagreements. Wait,
is he saying you joined the capitalist class because you have a Patreon?
No. What I'm saying is I'm offering a capital class on the Patreon right now.
Okay.
So,
capital with a K. All right.
Yeah. Well, right. We don't have.
I was thinking I was going to have to explain like class for it. But wait, whose podcast am I on? Obviously, I wouldn't have to do that.
Yeah. So I guess, then Nick and Ann, I don't know, but in any case, I mean, I think based on, I guess maybe the last thing I'll say on my end before we get going is that based on what I've seen from Sohrab in the past on this issue and when it's come up in conversation with him, what I'm guessing is that the sort of most compelling part of what he's going to say is that there are a lot of things about the status quo that are kind of bad for everybody. That you have, that like having a big pool of people who are, desperate enough to take all sorts of poverty level under the table employment is, leads to lots of things that are not great for them. It undercuts the bargaining power of other workers, all this stuff. Right. And I think there's a lot of truth to all that. But where I tend to disagree with that position is then, okay, we've like agreed that a problem exists, right? But then the question is, what's the solution to that problem, right? Like this is, do we want to try to solve it by, by having, this, what would at this point be like a, if you were really going to deport everybody, there'd really be like a deportation operation on a almost unimaginable scale to really make that happen. And I think would be at such a scale that it would be sort of impossible to do it in ways that didn't involve like pretty bad human rights violations. And
it would also just absolutely devastate like huge parts of the American economy. A lot of people don't realize this, but like the United States had open borders with Mexico for most of its history. It used to be and then all of a sudden it just gets dropped in there, and they almost makes me think of like Game of Thrones, with the wildlings, where the egret, the redheaded woman, is like, they just put up a wall and told us that that was theirs now, but we've always been here. I think there is a lot of truth in that sort of situation where
I think there is a lot of truth, but I also so I think that I think the diagnosis, the problem is not wrong. I think that the solution is very unattractive if that's the implied solution. And then I think that there's I think that there is I do think there's a better way, right? Like whatever sort of uncertainties that I was admitting to a minute ago about the sort of exact details of again, if I could just, wave a magic wand and have my whole wish list exactly what I would want, I do think that there are some things that are fairly clear that, if you, which include the fact that if you aren't prepared to do what I just said, right? Mm-hmm. If you aren't prepared to go that far in that draconian direction, then say, okay, well, what are the other things that we could do to solve this problem? And I think that actually letting people come out from the shadows so they can do things like join unions, use the courts, against employers, all of that stuff, is, I think that would at least be a partial solution to the same set of problems that I think is rightly identifying. And that's certainly a solution I'm a lot more comfortable with. So that's my sort of, I think, complete set of biases here.
Yeah, I mean, there's a difference between our two positions in this point is that I'm kind of starting from a particular ideological bent, and I'm saying, okay, this is the goal. Now, is there a better way to create that? Probably, and I would not necessarily be against having those kinds of restrictions as long as we are doing our best to move towards that goal, as opposed to, getting the idea in our heads that, America is for Americans and nobody else can come here. Like, not only is that like stupid and racist, it's also like just a bad way to run a country, especially in the first world, because like what we see, and I hope Cenk brings this up, is that, well, he probably won't go this far into it, but essentially in a capitalist economy, the economy must perpetually grow. If it's not growing, it's either in recession or it's crashing. So it's like the bus from Speed, except you've got to go up and up and up. Now, birth rates drop off in first world nations. So as soon as you're industrialized, people stop having so many kids and instead have fewer kids, but focus on those. So you have to constantly be expanding the economy, and without a large, influx of new babies from the citizenry, the best and most effective way to do that reliably is through immigration. And whether it be legal or illegal, immigrants, and I'm sure the Reason Magazine guy is going to bring this up, they are always a net positive for the economy. Even with all like the little issues that we can have with it, ultimately, if we are to keep our economy and our country on the rails going into this next century with the birth rates we have, in my opinion, the best way to do that is to move towards open borders as much as you can. But again,
okay. So let me just say on that though, right? That look, what would we? I mean, as I said, I'm definitely somebody who's who supports a vastly more humane and welcoming immigration policy than we have. But I mean, just to push back on that, if only a devil's advocate way, right? What would we say about that phrase, the economy, right?
Yeah.
In any other context, right? We'd say, well, hold on, what does that mean? The economy, right? Like that's does that mean, just like, how much growth is going on? Cause that's, cause of course, that might be a precondition for the stuff that we care about. Right. But like, oftentimes, right, the economy means profits. And of course, what we care about the most is,
by the way, Ben, I just love that we are accidentally having a debate right now.
Yeah, a little bonus debate before we watch the debate. So, I think that what we would care about most is, wages, how much power, working class people have. And, that's where, the thing, even again, if you're, not prepared to contemplate because, you're against it on principle, the solution, right, that's sort of put forward by the like populist anti-immigration types, and I'm certainly not, right, but like the problem that they're highlighted, some of them I think, like Sohrab, I give some credit for sincerity. In many other cases I think they're full of shit, but like I think that however sincere they are or aren't about it, right, the problem that they're highlighting is, that look, if you, all else being equal, right, greater supply of cheap labor does reduce, the bargaining power of the sellers of labor, right? I mean, like that is true, right? Like that's, so, again, what the solution to that is, how big a problem it is, whether it's like other things balance it out, right? I think these were all things that there's like, way more room to argue about. But I mean, this is my big hesitation about sort of going to, Reason magazine about how you make this case from the left.
Yeah, no, well, again, that's just, it's one of the, like, honestly, I've been looking to do a debate like with David D. Friedman. So if anybody can think of some people on this issue that we should be debating, let me know, because he's actually mentioned he'll only do it if we can get like some good opponents, though.
Yeah. Okay. So that's actually interesting. That's worth thinking about. But meanwhile, though, we should
move on to the actual reason people are here
debate and watch the actual debate. So this is let's see, borders. Should the U.S. shut its borders? All right, I'm gonna see if I can get this in the skip most of the introduction so we can get to the actual debate a little faster.
While you're pulling that up, I'll just say very quickly for the audience. Oh, it's already up. Never mind.
No. Say it. We've got a second to find the spot we're looking for.
Yeah. So Ben, you kind of mentioned that it's something that I'm not prepared to consider because of where my ideological position is. I just wanted to clarify. Yeah. I am always willing to consider whatever somebody has on a particular issue, especially if it contradicts with my ideology. Because
no, that's fair enough. I mean, it wasn't meant as an accusation of closed-mindedness. It was just sort of as it was just kind of meant as like, look, I mean, there are there are lots of things that I wouldn't be willing. I mean, maybe we want a different word than consider, but there are like lots of things that I would rule out pretty quickly as solutions to various problems, just because like I think that they violate some principle that I care a lot about, right? Like, it could be that, it's like, man, I'll bet we'd have like a lot, I think that it's like, I don't know, you pick some like instance of like low level criminality, that we could agree is actually pretty bad. Right. Like, I don't know what's a good example here, but like, something that's not victimless, but is also like not a big deal, like, what's that?
Speeding.
Speeding. Sure. Speeding is bad. Right. Yeah. people, causes accidents, people die, right? Like, speeding is bad. Like, people should speed less.
By the way, I'm noticing here in the clip here, it says, should the United States shut its borders? Its borders are already shut. Like right at the beginning there, they're already framing.
I guess maybe we mean like shut them tighter, but yeah. But yeah, look, so somebody said, hey, if we instituted the death penalty for speeding, then like actually if you run the numbers, we'll end up like saving slightly more lives than we're taking or something. I would be very not open to that. Because I think that like executed speeders would be really wrong. And I'm not, that's, and I don't think that's like a matter of closed-mindedness. I think that's just kind of saying like, I think that the like the thing under consideration would be such like a profound violation of the values that I care about. Right. That like, it would take an awful lot to convince me of that, right? That's kind of all I meant by that.
There was a Star Trek: The Next Generation episode about this. What I'll say for like the death penalty and tiered punishment and such, one of the reasons you don't want to jump straight to the death penalty is once you make a crime, the punishment for it death, then when a person commits it, they have an incentive specifically to murder the people that saw them commit it. So because they don't lose anything at that point, so if you're speeding and you get caught by somebody, in this weird dystopian.
Yeah, but that's not the only reason, right? Like that's not the only reason you wouldn't want to execute speeders, that like you're afraid that'll mean that more witnesses get bumped off. That might be on the list of reasons, right? But like, it's not really like, if you can like.
Yeah, it would be ridiculously evil for a society to murder people because they were speeding.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Right. All right. Well, let's see if we can get to it.
Nick is editor-at-large at Reason, the libertarian magazine of free minds and free markets. He's also the host of the Reason interview with Nick Gillespie, but nevertheless tried to run
American literature.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Okay, last but not least, we have Cenk Uygur. Cenk is the host of The Young Turks and co-founder of the Justice Democrats. He is the author of Justice is Coming. He is a proud American born in Turkey, but nevertheless tried to run for the presidency in 2024. To which I say, if a man facing 88 charges across 4 criminal cases can run for president, why not a non-natural born US citizen? Please welcome Cenk. Okay, we have an unbelievable lineup for you tonight. So let me explain the rules. Each debater on the stage is going to get a 5-minute opening statement explaining their position on the motion. We're going to start with Anne, then we're going to go to Nick, then to Sohrab, and finally to Cenk. Now, those opening remarks are going to be followed by short rebuttals from each participant in the same order. Then we're going to mix it up. Hopefully there won't be any blood. And then at the end, there will be 2-minute closing statements. Then you'll get a chance to debate. And then we're all going to have a lot of drinks. Okay, so let's take a look at the initial polling results, please. Interesting. Should the United States shut its borders? 71% are with Sohrab and Anne for yes. 29% are with Nick and Cenk for no. I guess we should pack it in. Just kidding. I have a lot of faith in everyone here up on stage tonight. Okay, let's see who can change the most minds over the course of the next hour. And one last note before we begin.
Just a quick note to people have heard me say this before, so I won't dwell on it. But man, I really hate polls and debates because this just seems like it's like
they're poisoning the well. They right there told everybody in the room that most people agree with the right on this rather than the left. And even if that's true, that means that every single person in that room is going to have a slight bias towards the right-wing people. They've even done like a number of sociological experiments about this, even with like, a woman will do better on a test if she's told that women do well on these tests. So psychologically, I'm already mad about the framing. Well,
I also just think that it's this is like I like structured debates. I like it when people know, you know, whose turn it is to speak and how long they have to speak and all that. I'm a big fan of all that, right? But the one thing about these that, like, that kind of, you know, Oxford style debate or whatever, that like I dislike is the voting, because it just seems to me that it's based on a false and sort of silly theory of how persuasion works. That, you know, because of course, you know, people do change their minds and arguments play a role in it, but like realistically, if you think about the times you've changed your mind in your life, how often was it like instantaneous, right? You hear the argument and then like right away you're like, oh, now I see the error of my ways, right? Like that's not how it works. Like all you're doing, if you like, all this could possibly be registering, even if ever, you know, is just like kind of how the rhetoric hits people in that moment, right? Like I think that usually,
I can tell you, Ben, that, you know, I started out as a red-blooded American male being very, very hostile to anarchist ideology. I was like, well, this can't possibly be a thing. And I'll tell you, for me, what changed, there were a couple things. There was some major life experience. Hiking the Appalachian Trail, Maine to Georgia was a really big one. Moving to New York City, but also arguing with, but this was really the big one, arguing with anarchists on the internet, to where I realized in like mid-argument, oh shit, I don't know what anarchism is. So then I had to go and learn about anarchism. I went back, won the argument, and then like 6 months later, I was like, ah, shit, they were right about everything.
Yeah, right, because that's how it actually works. Like every time you change your mind about something that's important to you, you know, it's not going to be the first time you hear the considerations that are eventually going to move you, right? Like, I mean, that's, if it's planted a seed, it's going to take a while to sprout, right? Like it's just this idea that like that's the test, whether you come around instantly, just seems like weirdly psychologically unrealistic to me. But
it's not even how people work. We're not, you don't just give a person the right information and then they say, oh, thank you, and adopt it. We resist change, especially when stuff like this, where it's kind of related to, you know, what tribe you identify with, you know, what sect. It's more like that poll right there is more rah rah go team than this is my real considered position, you know?
And it's as much for all of you as it is for our debaters. We're here tonight to have a real discussion. On this topic especially, it is the easiest thing in the world to accuse one side of this debate of bigotry, xenophobia, and racism, and it's equally so on the other side, who often stand accused of lunacy, lawlessness, and cheating the electoral system. And in that kind of accusations, the actual substance of the debate gets drowned out. For the next hour or so, we're not going to do that. If you want mudslinging, you can turn on cable. Okay, is everybody ready?
You can go to Mountain Day Debate.
The United States should shut its borders. And Coulter, you are first up, and you have 5 minutes for your opening argument. Then a bell will ring when you have 1 minute left.
Oh. I have a lot more than 6 minutes, but I'll try to keep it to that. There's a reason millions of people are trying to come to our country. But if they come, we won't be our country anymore. They are leaving their failed cultures. They're coming to a very, very successful culture. What is a culture other than the people who are in it? If just crossing the Rio Grande turns people into freedom-loving Americans, we can stop all wars, just bring the Afghans over, dump them in the Rio Grande, bring the Iraqis over, dump them in the Rio Grande, send them back. No, a culture is the people who live in it. We're more than just a landmass. Or the Indians would have written the Declaration of Independence, built New York City, put a man on the moon. It's like taking a very expensive wine bottle and pouring vinegar into it and then pretending it's the same wine bottle. No, the culture is the people. There are 8 billion people in the world, and most of them would love to come here. 4 billion of them, which is to say more than half, live on less than $10 a day. Are we going to take them all, move them all into the confines, the landmass of our country? Well, no, of course, we're going to have to choose. So how do we choose? I think we should choose people who are better than us, people who are better looking, who are taller, who are smarter. Let's get our average up. And for the first 300 years, which I'll explain in a moment, that's how our country worked. But we can't do that anymore because Teddy Kennedy needed a legacy. He was in his room pouting. He wanted a civil rights bill too. His brothers both got to have one. Apparently our entire country is about improving the self-esteem of this one Irish Catholic family. So his prize, his Kennedy family prize, was civil rights for the entire world. Thus, we got the 1965 Civil Rights Act. It sounds like, the belief of some hippie cult. Every poor person in the world has the right to come here, and we have to take care of them. They not only does every poor person get to come, but they get to bring their cousins. In America, your family is your spouse and your kids. This nephew, third cousin, brother-in-law. No, that's third world stuff. This isn't family reunification. We are doing tribal reunification. The difference between pre-1965, post-1965 immigrants is huge. I think when most people say, like Trump, no, we like legal immigrants, or when they get weepy about their grandfathers at Ellis Island, they're really talking about the difference between pre-1970, post-1970. That's about how long it took for Kennedy's 1965 act to kick in. Pre-1970 immigrants were better than us. They were more educated, they were wealthier, they bought more houses. Oh boy, post-1970 immigrants aren't that at all. They are far more likely to be on welfare. There are a lot of ways to fiddle with the numbers, but one of the main ones is counting anchor babies as Americans. Well, okay, most of our welfare is dedicated to poor people with children. So if the illegal runs across the border, 8 months pregnant, drops a baby, and then starts collecting welfare on that anchor baby who's about to bring in her whole village, that can be counted as an American citizen on welfare. So what you want to look at is foreign-born head of family versus native-born, US-born head of family. And when those comparisons are made, the foreign-born head of family, 54% collecting government assistance. US-born head of family, and by the way, that includes all of the immigrants that have come in since the 1965 Civil Rights Act, 34%. Now, the reason for this, and the reason we didn't have to have any rules before, there was an ethnic preference for the countries that founded and built this country, but you didn't really have to have rules. It was hard to get here. You had to have some stamina to even get here. But moreover, there was no welfare. That is the crucial turning point. It was a double whammy in 1965. We're going to have the Great Society programs, and we're going to open up immigration to the third world. In fact, prefer the third world. Interestingly, pre-1970 immigrants, Ellis Island immigrants, 30% of them went home because they couldn't make it in America. No welfare. If you can't do something, you're going to starve or you're going to go home. 60% of Southern Italians went home. The fewest who went home were the English, Scandinavians, and the Jews. That was like 5 to 10%. So now we're just bringing in the poorest people of the world with the most dissonant cultures, and we have collective lying from the media, the Democrats, the Republicans. The Republicans want the donor money for the cheap labor. I've never seen an issue more lied about. The media will tell you about every immigrant valedictorian, but will not tell you about the child rape, about the drunk driving, about the human smuggling, about the slavery they're bringing in. Yep, we fought a war to end it. Now we're getting it back. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anne.
It was the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life.
In general, I'm going to try to, do like 10-minute intervals or so between stops just to get through this all in the same time. But there's so much to unpack there, can't not pause for this. So initial thoughts.
She's a professional troll, and I do not believe that she is as dumb as she's coming across here in a lot of this stuff. Like, okay, you got the ad hominem against Ted Kennedy, but the biggest thing that I saw here right at the beginning is she is working from a position of bad philosophy. She's defining culture as a settled thing that is stationary, but then she also defines it as being the people. You can't have it both ways, Anne. Either culture is a living thing that changes with the people, because the population is always changing. People are moving, even just from state to state in the United States. So right off the bat, I see that not as a mistake. I think that's intellectual dishonesty. Now you can say if I'm right or wrong about that.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't know. Do you watch the Boondocks?
I have seen the Boondocks quite a few times. Which episode?
Do you remember the episode of Cenk Coulter?
You know what? I actually don't, but now I got to go watch it.
Okay, well, just, this is my gift to you. There's a Boondocks episode of Cenk Coulter. Check it out. But yeah, this is always the strong suggestion in that episode is that she doesn't really mean it. So is Aaron Magruder right about that? I don't know. I mean, would it be better, or would she be more or less of an evil clown if she didn't believe it? I suppose that's debatable, but
Ben, I have debated Alex Stein twice, and that opening, I think it gave me another ulcer just on its own. So,
Alex Stein, 99. I know very little about him, except that I've seen like 2 clips of him on the internet, and one of them was him rapping at a city council meeting, and that one is like burned into my head forever. But fair enough.
He's literally he's a performance artist that is
sure.
Putting himself in. He's trying to come out as like an activist. He's a performance artist, and normally I'm fine with that, but
he seems like a very unpleasant version of it. But yeah, I mean, look, I think regardless, I'm usually, in this case, there is a certain kind of craning at the car crash fascination to try to figure out how much of this she believes. But, normally I'm relatively indifferent to that, because I think that people are often like way too focused on who's good faith, bad faith, whatever. I mean, I think that the important thing is whether or not she believes it. A lot of other people do. And, they believe it when they hear her say it. And so, the content I think is more important than the sincerity it's been delivered with. Mm-hmm. But just on the content, okay, 2 initial thoughts. One of them is much less important than the other, but I do feel like it's maybe worth saying anyway. That little, when she was kind of doing like racist free association slam poetry, and she said, it's the, culture isn't just the location, or else the Indians would have written the Declaration of Independence. Like, hold up. When the ancestors of the vast majority of Americans, were living under absolutist monarchies, the Iroquois Confederacy was actually way closer to the ideals of the Declaration of Independence, right? So
you're touching on something. A lot of America's system is partially based on the Iroquois Confederation. So quite literally, from our founding, there has been an element of Native American social structure inherent, like within our government. Now, I say there's not nearly enough. Anarchists are very heavily influenced by the ways that the Native Americans lived. But yeah, she's even wrong on that point.
Yeah. I mean, like literally, the dig doesn't work if you think about it for 10 seconds. That's like, well, no, right? Like, it's not actually that there's something sort of genetically magical about people from England and Northern Europe that makes them like congenial to freedom and democracy in ways that like all the other people aren't. because actually the chronology doesn't work there, right? Like, you have, in fact, look, I mean, if we're really going to be sticklers for it, even if we're going to stick with the old world, pretty sure there's, democracy in Southern Europe first. But anyway, whatever. That's,
I mean, before we move on, I have two quick things. So one, this is nothing debate wise. I just really wanted to say it. So, and if the goal is to bring in people that are better than us, can we also like kick out all the dumb people in the country, starting with you?
Yeah, I mean, she might agree with the principle, but disagree with the application.
Kick out the dumb people. Yeah, no, she would use that. But that was the one thing. The other thing that I wanted to point out, though, besides the tribal reunification dog whistle, is this. You notice at the beginning how she framed it. She created bad versions of the argument she thinks she's going to be reaching. And she's doing that because when the audience hears the good versions of those arguments, a lot of them will just dismiss it as the bad argument. I even had this happen in a debate, kind of on Modern Day Debate. It was like a 9-person thing. And I was talking about why the story of Breonna Taylor being shot in her bed caught on. And, I'm bringing up like the history with Fred Hampton and all that kind of stuff. I'm talking specifically about why this is such a widely known thing, because she didn't technically die in her bed. And before I could even finish what I was saying, people were just like, oh, that's spiritually true. Yeah. They're already turning off because they've already thought that they already are experienced with an inferior version of that argument. Make sense?
Yeah, no, I think that is right. So
it's poisoning the well.
Right. So I think the other thing that I wanted to to bring up, and it's also like, God, this is like in a different way than I was saying earlier, like listening to stuff like this sort of brings out my my inner libertarian, because it's like, Jesus Christ, Dan, human beings are individuals. They're not, they're not representatives of like some sort of like weird, geographical or like collectives. Right. So it's like when you say, she even slipped up at one point. I assume this isn't exactly what she meant to say, and talked about the countries that founded this country, which is a really weird way to put it.
Yeah.
What she meant obviously was the countries where the people who founded this country came from, but like it's maybe kind of a telling slip up, because it's like, okay, but are you talking about like those individuals, right? Or is it somehow, like some weird, like, some weird ethnic hive mind that you think did it? Because if so, that's really confusing, right? Because it's like, well, hold on. Like, so, George III was also part of the ethnic hive mind, right? Like, so why was he on the wrong side, right? Like, so, none of that really, really makes very much sense. But yeah, I mean, I think that and then the other thing, I think is just really telling here. So, is her representation of the Johnson era immigration reform, which, what that, like there are points where she was describing that almost as if that was like an open borders bill, which of course it wasn't anything of the kind. The number of slots that are available, for, like people, like, I mean, it's not even like there are a number of spots and you can get in some like long wait list or something. That's not at all how it works. But the number of people who, are legally allowed to immigrate is obviously far less than, would want to. And for most people, there just is no avenue to do that. Right. I mean, that, if you don't have an asylum case, you're not on like approved kinds of visas for employment and other things, then there are just very few, like there's some lottery stuff, but I mean, like there are very few avenues, and for most people it's not like they can get on. Like, people have this misconception that there's like a big waiting list you can get on, which would actually be much more just than what we have. There's there isn't one. So that, then again, more racist slam poetry about the Kennedy family, which is actually kind of impressive because that's some like real vintage, like
they're really mad. You know what? I'm convinced she brought that up because of who's the guy that's running that might take votes away from
RFK Jr.
Yeah, I think it's 100%. That's why she cited the Kennedy,
because like this is like some weird 19th century racism, Irish Catholics, but yeah, that's like in when she was doing all of that. I guess the thing that you sort of have to give her credit for is that she did come right out and say what her position is, or at least came pretty close to it. So I always think of Liz Brunig's line about how half the point of a debate is to get the other person to tell you what they really think. And, in this case, I mean, this is like always what, I mean, like in this case, there's no process of like pulling it out, right? I mean, she's just coming right out in her opening statement, because like the thing that the Ted Kennedy immigration reform did was it eliminated the ethnic restrictions, right? And like said, no, it's not that we have more slots for people from these parts of the world or anything like that. And here is Anne pretty openly saying, no, actually, that was good. We should have kept those, which is really astonishing, right? That's not something that most people who have her position are willing to come right out and say. So I think that's useful. I suspect there's an issue here with in sales. It's kind of called fence posting. I've heard it called, like if you're involved in a negotiation, you always want to throw out, like, say you're trying to get somebody to give you a bunch of money. You always want to throw out more money than what you actually want. And the reason why is that very first number that hits, that sets the expectations for the negotiation from the very beginning. So essentially what she's doing here when she comes out like that is she is yanking the debate, and she's also yanking the what's it called, the window. What's the window thing called? Overton window.
The Overton window. Yeah.
Maybe.
I feel
I will say that I think where people often go wrong with Overton window stuff is that persuasion isn't really a negotiation, right? Like that, because like the reason, if you're actually negotiating with somebody, the only way that can work is if you have some kind of leverage and you can you can actually cause some pain if you don't get what you want. Whereas I think if as an initial rhetorical negotiating position, if you say something that's obviously crazy, then the danger is that people are just going to dismiss you. They'll be like, well, you sound crazy.
Yeah, I guess you're right on that. I think it probably depends a lot on the exactly how big the ask is. You know?
That's true too.
But yeah, so that I was annoyed about that. But yeah, I think overall this was a very poor way to begin the debate from a debate tactic. But I think from a polemic where she is specifically playing on the audience's emotions and specifically playing on their overwhelming biases, as we saw with that, 70, almost 75%. I think that is just throwing red meat to them at this point. So it's not a good debate tactic, but if you want to be bad faith,
might pander to the people who are in the room. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. Last thing I want to bring up is that she said there are however many billion people in the world, most of them want to come here. Not true. The reason that I know it's not true is because there's actual polling data on this, and there are. And they ask people in different countries, right? If you were able to tomorrow, right? If there were no restrictions, would you move somewhere else? And if so, what country would be your first choice? And so in for example, January 2023, I'm looking at Gallup, about 16% of adults worldwide said they would like to leave their own country permanently if they could. So that's a lot of people, but also 16% is a whole lot less than most. And also out of those, this is not the same poll, so take this with a grain of salt, but the other one that I could find that said what the destination preference would be, about 18% say the United States. So
possibly 18% of 16% might
exactly
want to go to the United States.
Yeah. So 18% of 16% is much less than most, right? Most would be over 50%. This is like less than a couple 100 million people.
I'm glad you brought that up. Really quickly, by the way, before we move on to the next one, because I want to make sure I remember to get this out. When she was talking about culture, so there's a book you guys can check out. It's called the 11 Nations of America. And it's the idea, and I think this is a correct idea, that the first people to settle an area, that hasn't been in some way violently disrupted, sort of format the hard drive for that area. You'll notice that, the culture in Texas is very, very different from the neighboring cultures. And so the argument that this book makes is that the United States is not one nation. It is 11 separate nations divided essentially regionally. And these regional divisions come up with culture. So difference between Scotch Irish in Kentucky and Swedish kind of Norse in Michigan. The actual architecture, but also sort of the very minute sort of cultural level habits and customs sort of get pulled into a particular way. So even if you have a large population of immigrants that are going to come in, it's not vinegar being poured into a wine bottle. You're essentially making a wine blend at that point, and it will always kind of trend towards what the wine was before than what you're adding. I don't know. The analogy breaks down at this point, but the point is that she is 1000% wrong, even when she makes these points about culture. That's not how culture works.
I mean, look, I think everybody kind of intuitively knows this, that that most people whose families, even people who are first generation Americans who came over as kids, 20 years later, are often extraordinarily culturally assimilated, right? That's pretty obvious. And I mean, I always think of my friend Bhaskar Sankar from Jacobin, who had this line once about another friend of ours, who'd want to talk to him about spirituality. He'd be like, I don't know, man, my family came to this country so we could eat French fries and watch action movies. I'm not really interested in that, but yeah, I mean, I think yeah, so it's just, the numbers are way off. Again, a couple 100 million people, I guess 162 million, doing a little quick math there, is still a lot of people, but it's nothing like what she's suggesting. And yeah, 100% on the cultural variation. I mean, I grew up in mid-Michigan, and since, I've also lived in a couple places outside the United States, but within the United States, I've lived in Pennsylvania, Florida, Georgia, New Jersey, and California. And English speaking Canada feels to me way more like home than any of those places that I just listed off do, right? Because those feel much, much more foreign to me. But in any case, let's keep going.
Next up is Nick Gillespie, arguing that no, the United States should not shut its borders. And because Anne got an extra 50 seconds or so, and Nick, I'll grant that to either you or Cenk, whoever needs it.
All right, thank you. I'm the token libertarian on the panel, and I know that means you probably think I'm going to talk most about economics and drugs, and you'll be right. I am going to talk most about economics and drugs tonight. In 1902, the nativist publication Judge, which I'm pretty sure Anne had a column in, ran a cover image showing a giant horseshoe magnet suspended from a rope titled American Prosperity. And then all sorts of stereotypical bad immigrants. These were Chinese coolies, fez-wearing Turks, weird people who were probably Persian, French actresses, bomb-throwing Italians, Russian peasants, European-looking people who were just carrying bags that said filth on them were being sucked into the magnet. And the caption of the magnet on the cover of this Judge issue just said, "The only bad feature of our prosperity." We're a nation of immigrants, but we have never, ever, ever been comfortable with the ones currently streaming across our borders. And it's fascinating to hear Anne talk about how, the Jews were pretty good, as pre-1970 people. Jews were locked out of this country to such a degree that millions perished during the Holocaust because they couldn't emigrate to America, including Otto Frank. That was the law, that Teddy Kennedy amended. So we've never been comfortable with the people streaming across our borders. It was true in 1902. It's true in 2024. Last year saw what the AP called a record number of illegal crossings into America from Mexico. And that's not even the whole story, since the majority of people in the country illegally don't bum rush their way across the southern border. They come here legally and then don't leave. That's why South Asian Indians are the third largest illegal people who are illegal in America. Is that your vision of an illegal immigrant? But what's strange about these invaders, these people who are rushing into our country and destroying everything, is what do they do when they get here? They break into our country and then they pick our crops, prepare our meals, cut our lawns, clean our toilets, and babysit our children. What strange armies of the night. At the same time that we are creating a panic on the border, and we need to deal with that, we've made it harder and harder for people to immigrate legally. Over 9 million people are waiting to get green cards, and the wait time has skyrocketed over the past few decades from mere months to decades. Immigrants want to come to America now for the same reason they did 100 years ago when my grandparents came here from shithole countries, as Donald Trump talked, from Italy and Ireland. They come here because of American prosperity. And they don't come here to destroy American prosperity. They come here to enjoy it and expand it and make it rich and new again. Contra Donald Trump, illegal immigrants are not bringing drugs or crime. Illegal immigrants commit fewer crimes than native-born Americans. Legal immigrants commit fewer crimes than native-born Americans. Immigrants have a higher labor force participation rate, and they're more likely to start a business than native-born Americans. In fact, immigrants and their children started 45% of today's Fortune 500 companies. They're stealing from us, aren't they? Even anti-immigrant economists like Harvard's George Borjas, himself a refugee from Castro's Cuba, conclude that immigrants on net are a boon because they expand markets and fill labor gaps. The Congressional Budget Office has said that the deficit going forward will be $1 trillion less over the next decade because immigrants have expanded the economy. So what should we do? We should create a system that allows more people to come here legally and enter through the front door. Nobody can shut the border. Donald Trump, Peter Savodnik in the Free Press wrote recently that even Donald Trump couldn't shut America's borders. He slashed, and I'm quoting here, he slashed legal immigration by making it harder to get a green card or a visa, even as he failed to stop migrants from crossing the border. What people who want to shut the borders want is prohibition, this time for people. Prohibition was passed 100 years ago at the same time that the first wide-scale exclusionary acts against Europeans was passed, driven by the same thing, fear of un-American immigrants like Catholics and Jews from Central and Southern Europe. It was costly and ineffective. Within a couple of years, Americans were drinking more liquor than they had before Prohibition was passed. We get the same thing with border control. Things have tripled since the creation of the Department of Homeland Security. The amount of money being spent on border security has tripled, and yet we seem to have less of it. Let's create an orderly, regulated, and growing market for immigration, just like we ultimately did for beer and booze. Let people who want to live and work peacefully here come and do so. We can vet them and have them apply in their own countries and then come here to where they want to be rather than getting clogged up at the southern border or any place in particular. Allow individuals, churches, businesses, and nonprofits to sponsor them. Immigrants are already barred from most forms of welfare, as they should be. We should tighten up that. Our national debt is out of control. We should be building a wall around the welfare state, not the United States. We need
We're having such a nice time,
legalize
and you had
immigrants
to
pulled
drop
here
that
by the
dump in there.
magnet of our prosperity and get on with the business of building the future of our country rather than trying to restore a tattered, imagined past. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick.
And I was just about ready.
Next up is Sohrab Ahmari arguing that yes, the United States should shut its.
Yeah, I know. I like so much of it, and he had to throw that in at the end. But yeah, let's watch Sohrab's and then we'll talk about both.
Borders.
Well, thank you all for being here. I'll tell you two things about myself that are pertinent to this debate. The first is that I'm a legal immigrant to the United States and a proud American by choice. The second is that I believe that we must shut down the border to the mass movement of millions of low-wage economic migrants masquerading as asylum seekers. Now, why do I take this position? It's because years ago, I started reading right-wing reactionary pundits and thinkers. I'm thinking of people like, Anne here. In one of her books years ago, Anne wrote, "Many of the worst off native-born Americans are hurt by immigration, especially immigration from Latin America, because these immigrants, quote, have much less education than the average US worker. They increase the supply of less skilled labor, driving down the wages of the worst paid Americans." She also pointed out that low-skilled immigrants threaten to unravel our safety net. Oh, wait, it wasn't Ann Coulter who said that. It was the progressive economist Paul Krugman, writing in the New York Times in 2006. Okay, well, maybe I confused Coulter and Krugman, but I definitely remember the arch-reactionary Pat Buchanan saying, quote, "This country is suffering from immigrant indigestion. It is time to call a halt on this grand rush for American gold, which overfloods the labor market, resulting in lowering the standard of living. The excessive immigration is against the interests of the masses of all races and nationalities in our country." Man, Buchanan's rhetoric could really sizzle, right? Nope, it wasn't Pat Buchanan who said that. It was Philip Randolph, the African-American labor activist and civil rights leader who organized the 1963 March on Washington, at which Dr. King delivered his "I Have a Dream" speech. Okay, I'm sure I'll get this next one right. It was Steve Bannon who, during his stint in the Trump White House, wrote a policy memo noting that an effectively regulated immigration policy establishes limits on the number of immigrants. Moreover, these limits must be strictly enforceable. And he also said that no unskilled low-wage migrants should be admitted. Oops, I'm wrong on this last count too. No, it wasn't Bannon who wrote those words. The words come from a 1995 report of the U.S. Commission on Immigration Reform, chaired at the time by Barbara Jordan. Jordan, of course, should be a familiar name to a Texas audience. She was a protege of President Lyndon B. Johnson, the first African-American woman elected to the Texas State Senate since Reconstruction, and the first ever Southern Black woman elected to the U.S. House of Representatives. Notice a pattern. Today, progressives and pro-business libertarian donors and lobbies, like Nick, frame opposition to mass irregular migration as something that could only be motivated by reactionary racism. But until fairly recently, opposing the importation of low-wage migrants was the consensus position of the Democratic Party and the labor movement. Why? Because an earlier generation of progressives understood that low-wage migration is one of the chief ways by which large employers play nations, populations, and jurisdictions against each other to lower labor costs. It's called corporate arbitrage. Progressives once understood that this kind of migration undercuts the wages of working-class people, strains the social services relied upon by the poorest among us, and hinders productivity growth and thus our prosperity as a nation. In this country, going back to our founding, some employers have always preferred to have workers they can utterly dominate. And that's what you get by admitting millions of people who are completely vulnerable to their employers, who can't speak the language, who lack the power to organize. That's why libertarians and Koch brother types in the Wall Street Journal editorial page have always supported open borders. What's curious about our time is that this has become the progressive position. But maybe it isn't so strange. Fact is, low-wage migrant labor sustains the lifestyles of people in my caste, and maybe some of the people in your class. Upper middle-class urban knowledge workers who like to pretend we can afford the lifestyles of the old gentry with nannies and gardeners and house cleaners, servants on the cheap. And we can afford such a lifestyle by importing vulnerable, hyper-exploitable workers into the home. The old exploiter open or slave entry perhaps its own advantage in the garb of humanitarian. You can support Nick and
All right, I think.
What the hell happened there?
I'm going to repeat some of it in a second. But,
honest.
oh no,
You're
we good? All right, I think we're glitching out for a second, but we good now?
The thing's not playing on my end, and I'm hearing you.
Testing. That's not good. I wonder what I hear.
Ben, if you are here or not, or am I just the only one talking to the GTAA audience? Because that'd be awesome. Can somebody in the chat tell me if I'm going slowly or if Ben's out? All right, I'm gonna. Oh, well, shit. Okay, well, I guess we're gonna wait on Ben. So I think he made the argument that Ben was expecting him to make, that Ben seemed a little bit more amenable to. It's the idea that like illegal labor coming into a country hurts workers, and yes and no. Like they talked about like the anchor babies and everything. Everybody seems to be forgetting that like when an illegal immigrant comes into the country, they can't actually claim any like programs. Ben, are you back?
I am back. I'm a little worried about this. I'm at a friend's apartment, and the internet's been fine here in the past, so I'm hoping this is a one-time thing tonight. I know I was. Okay. I know I had the.
If we lose you, I'll just keep doing the show. That was what I was doing. Yeah.
It's the Brenton broadcast now. I see somebody saying in the chat.
I arranged for that to happen.
Fair enough. I actually wonder if this is a StreamYard issue, but in any case, let me just see if I can get this back. Why is this not going? Okay, here I'm gonna. Okay, so I'm not sure where we cut off there, but
it seemed like he was making the argument you said he was going to make. Things started to like cut off when he was talking about it hurting workers and citing labor people being racist.
I mean,
oh shit! Did we lose Ben again? Oh, oh man. Okay, So while we're waiting on Ben, I'm going to assume that you guys are still watching me, and that this is now the Brent and give them an argument with Brent and Lengel. All right, so my issue with the statement that it hurts workers, it potentially could hurt workers depending upon the social structure at the time, and obviously if we're moving towards a political goal in real life, as opposed to a political goal hypothetically, like happening tomorrow when you wave a magic wand, obviously that is an argument to be careful with specifically how you do it, specifically so that you don't hurt workers, so that you don't create enmity between immigrants and established labor. And in fact, we know that that's really important because, again, if you look back to the labor movement, labor really shot itself in the foot by not allowing Black people to join the union with them. And Eugene Debs, if I'm not mistaken, was really against this. But, the fact of the matter was that at the time, people were just too racist. And because they were racist, they did not have the power that they otherwise would have, because suddenly these Black people who would have been in the union were instead coming and working as scabs, which then just made everybody madder at them, and nobody wins in that point except the boss. I genuinely believe that if you want to have a socialist society of any kind, you need to have an internationalist society. The whole point of socialism, at least in sort of the libertarian socialism, context, is that class is more important than nationality when it comes to how you identify with people. And it looks like Ben is back. Ben,
I'm actually starting to get. Yeah, I'm actually starting to get worried that this is a computer issue on my part, since I have
do you have a phone?
Similar. No, I tried switching it to the hotspot, and anyway, we're not going to do on-air tech support. We are going to at least one more time gamely try to continue here. So
I want to hear Cenk.
So yeah.
Oh shit!
Oh no!
You froze again. Keep going.
Yeah.
Do you have any other tabs or anything open?
No. Let's skip the on-air tech support. I'm trying everything here. But in any case, yeah. All right. So I take it in my absence, you've been saying, giving your critique of this, but I'll just say really quickly that I think what I said earlier pretty much applies here. I think that there's a real problem that he's diagnosing. I mean, I think he's also making a sort of historical argument that I'm less impressed by, because I think that the idea that this was always the sort of lefty labor position, I think really flattens the history that that you can certainly find plenty of past labor leaders and people who are sort of good social democrats in other areas who did say things like what he's saying. I'll also note that the fact that that like every time I've heard one of these lists, it also includes Barbara Jordan, who I never hear anybody bring up in any other context in 2024, is probably pretty telling. But it's like, look, yeah, there are plenty of people who thought things like this, right? This is certainly a position that's existed in the labor movement and the broad left over the years. But the idea that this was always the position of those things, I think, is just not right. I mean, this is, it's certainly, in fact, if anything, I think that, there were certainly people who were sort of, social democratic politicos who thought stuff like this, certainly. But there are certainly labor leaders who did, but this was, much more the position of the center and the right of the labor movement than it was of the labor movement's left. That, you
with the bomb throwing Italians.
Yeah, I mean, certainly if you go back to like the IWW or, the, very.
Oh shit. Ben just disappeared again. It was going so well. All right. Well, while we're waiting for him to pop back in, I'm just going to point out with the bomb throwing Italians, I was actually born in Naples. I'm an Italian dual citizen. So yeah, I guess it makes sense that I landed exactly where I am. Okay. We're getting Ben back.
Yeah. Yeah. This is, all right.
You want to give it one more good college try and see if the problem is finally resolved?
Yeah. Let me think about this. Cause if there's a way, I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you're happy to talk to the chat for 5 minutes while I see if I can resolve this, that might be the best thing.
You mean you're just going to give me the state? Yeah, I think I can handle that, Ben.
All right, sounds good.
Oh. So while he's doing that, I see somebody in the chat did Sacco and Vanzetti. By the way, Sacco and Vanzetti are mentioned in issue number 1 of Durruti, Shadow of the People. This is I would read it to you, but this is the Spanish copy, and I can't actually speak Spanish. But one of the producers at Enon Films got together with me, and we managed to put out a Spanish version of issue 1. We hope to do a lot more, but yeah, it's really interesting, kind of how the anarchist movement has had its place within labor as long as it has, and so the guy pointed out, like, oh no, this quote is from the ex, Democrat. Yeah. Oh, wow. You found that there's some racist Democrats who suck on immigration. Yeah. No one on the left realized that. Yeah. So I think what I'd say kind of overall with this critique, and I think Ben was getting at, is that there are a lot of very intricate things. So when I'm talking about, the fact that, you cannot make a moral argument to stop the free movement of peaceful people. And that 1000%, is correct. That doesn't mean that there is not difficulty in actually implementing that principle. But if we start from that principle, from the principle that absolutely an accident does not make right, and an accident of birth does not mean that you have to stay in one spot on the planet. It's a giant ball of rock and water, twirling through infinite space, and we're sitting here like pissed off about imaginary lines. Okay. You can play that game if you want to, but is that going to lead to the most harmonious society and world, or is it going to lead to distrust, hatred, and war? And the fact of the matter is that so many of the greatest tragedies of the 20th century were specifically because of nationalism, specifically because of xenophobia. In a lot of ways, a rejection of this particular model of the nation state and of how borders works is a way to work towards a saner, more peaceful, more prosperous world for everyone. But that said, I write comic books. If you want to find somebody who's going to figure out exactly like how we create that society, I would ask Ben, because he probably knows somebody.
Nice transition. I like the improv, but this is clearly not working. Okay. Because I don't see anything when I try to screen share. So
it's two of us, and I don't see anything like in where there's normally the thing.
Yeah, exactly. Right. That like it's put us in little boxes on the side like it's supposed to, but it's not actually showing the debate on the right side, which makes me think that maybe there is some kind of maybe this is like just not quite good, and like maybe my internet here, which I don't know why this would be, but Yeah, this is actually very confusing because it looks like the signal is totally fine. I'm in a different place than I was with different Wi-Fi.
Have you tried a different browser? Yeah.
No, I could still do that. Okay. All right. I'm sure this is great. This is like riveting viewing for everybody, but I am going to go. Yeah. So this will be my final attempt for tonight. I'm going to see if I can switch browsers. And if
I was just going to suggest that on-air tech support. Oh, and there he goes again. Whew. Yeah. So anyway, while I got you guys here, somebody in the chat had said that they loved Snow White Zombie Apocalypse and we're waiting on the new one. That, in fact, is we just funded issue 5, or if you're getting them in the comic shop, issue 6. So it's a new one. If you guys want to get that, you can actually go on to the Kickstarter for Snow White Zombie Apocalypse number 1 to 5. And you can click pre-order Swaza number 5, and I'm literally editing this link as I saw it because they put the wrong one down the first time. Here we go. Good job. Oh, great. Now it's all messed up. But yeah, there is a pre-order store where you can give. You'll pay a lot more, than you would like at the comic shop, but you also can become a part of the series. We actually have people in Durruti number 2 who paid to be in the book, or in one case, have their cat in the book, which is really cool. Issue 2, by the way, this chronicles a real incident from history, a crossover between Ukrainian anarchist Nestor Makhno, who commanded the Black Army during the Russian Revolution, who fought to free Ukraine, while the Whites and the Reds fought to conquer it. And he's actually the one that wiped out the White Army twice. And then the Bolsheviks stabbed him in the back because of course they did. But he was forced to flee Ukraine, where he went to Vincennes, France, where he met Buenaventura Durruti, who had just gotten out from the stuff of issue number 1, which was his attempt on the life of the Spanish king, landed him in prison in France. But he was taken out of prison by a committed workers movement and a legal technicality. So yeah, the series is really great. People love it. There's a bunch of like really kind of interesting sort of anarchist lore and different like very specific references that I make. For instance, you guys look here in one of the pages where Nestor Makhno is bringing them forged passports. They all have fake names on the passports, but all the names are actually fake names that Durruti's group went by. Yeah, are we done? We can always do this some other time, Ben. I don't want to.
Yeah, I think we've got there. I think we are in fact going to officially throw the towel and say we're going to do it another time, because I don't know. I don't know on a technical level what's causing the problem, but whatever it might be. Oh, that's fascinating. Okay.
What just happened?
Oh, for a second, it was actually showing me the screen share like it was supposed to, but now it's not anymore. So hell with it. All right. So whatever this may be, I'm clearly having some sort of tech support issue. So, and whatever it is, I'm not going to solve it right now while we're doing this. So we are going to have to reschedule this, but this is
this has been fun. And I would say that I think it deserves to be looked at, because there's a lot of stuff just in these openings.
Yeah, no, that there is. This is actually going to be, this is actually incredibly frustrating. So this is yeah. See, is a nope. And I don't know. I don't know if this is, how much of this is StreamYard, how much of this.
And he froze again. Okay, guys. So I definitely apologize for this, but obviously I didn't do anything wrong. When it started glitching, I thought it was my internet, because my internet sucks. Oh boy. But yeah, so I was saying, by the way, earlier before this thing gets cut off, if you look at like the names on the passports, they're real aliases that Durruti and his anarchist group used. But if you look at Gregorio, Ascaso is the third of the three major anarchists from Durruti's gang. He's the one that lived.
All right.
I was going to explain, but it's long and boring.
No, this is good. This is definitely a useful talent, but I don't know how long it's going to give me this time, since I don't know what the hell's going on with whatever the technical issue might be, but I am going to call it right now. So I don't have to come back and try to do it again. So thank you, Brent. This is going to have to be what we've done tonight is going to have to stand as a preview of coming attractions. We will find another Thursday. We will reschedule this. We will find out what Cenk said. We will see what people say in response to the other people. All of these things will happen, but not tonight. Thanks for those of you who did hang in here until we realized that we had to cut it off, but we are going to have to do so. Left is best.